In 2049, Earth faced a disaster, leaving a scientist alone in the Arctic. While trying to warn astronauts about Earth's danger, he found a quiet little girl. Together, they braved harsh challenges. But was the girl real? Or was there a deeper secret behind their journey? In 2049, a scientist named Augustine Lofthouse was at an observatory in the Arctic Circle, eating alone. 3 weeks earlier, the facility had been evacuated because of a worldwide disaster that had killed most of Earth's population. The planet was becoming unsafe because of ionizing radiation spreading everywhere. Augustine stayed behind because he was very sick and knew he didn't have much time left. The authorities warned him that he needed regular blood transfusions to live and wouldn't last more than a week without them. During the evacuation, a woman desperately searched for her daughter, but a friend told her the girl had left on an earlier helicopter. After everyone was gone, Augustine stayed at the observatory, spending his final days alone. He watched as the radiation slowly got closer to his location. He managed to stay alive by giving himself transfusions, taking his medicine, sleeping, and looking at the stars. In a flashback, a younger Augustine gave a talk about K23, a moon of Jupiter that he had discovered. He explained that K23 had almost perfect conditions for supporting life. After the talk, a young woman named Jian spoke to him, and they began a playful relationship. On their second date, Jian surprised him by asking how much of his research on K23 was real and how much he had made up. In the present, Augustine checked to see which space missions were still active. All of them had stopped working, except for Ether, a spaceship with a crew returning from K23. Augustine wanted to contact the crew, especially a member named Sullivan. But the ship wouldn't be close enough for another 11 hours. On the Ether, Sully woke up and greeted her crewmates, Aide, Mitchell, and Sanchez. They had been unable to communicate with Earth for 3 weeks. The crew tried all the communication devices on the ship, but none worked, and they didn't know why. Sully also mentioned that a colony ship meant to go to K23 should have left Earth a week ago, but she couldn't contact it either. Back on Earth, Augustine was making dinner when he noticed a half-eaten bowl of food already on the table. He felt uneasy, but thought he might have forgotten about it. Later, while working, the fire alarm went off. Augustine found a fire in the kitchen and managed to put it out. As he rested on the floor, he was shocked to see a little girl hiding there. Augustine tried to call for help on the radio, but no one answered. He told the girl someone would come for her because he couldn't help her himself. Feeling sorry for scaring her, he made her dinner and asked about her family, but she didn't respond. He guessed she couldn't talk. The girl drew an iris flower, showing that her name was Iris. When the Ether came into range, Augustine quickly tried to contact them but failed. He explained to Iris that K23 was supposed to be humanity's new home, but the colony ship couldn't leave Earth in time because of the disaster. He also said he needed to warn the Ether's crew about Earth's condition so they wouldn't land on the dying planet. That night, Iris came to sleep in his room, even though he had told her not to. Later, Augustine worked on fixing the antenna but realized it wasn't strong enough to send a signal to the Ether. He had dinner with Iris, who enjoyed playing with her food. Augustine joined in and played along with her. On the Ether, the captain, Adewale, recorded his log. He explained that since they couldn't figure out why all communication on Earth had stopped, they thought the issue might be with their own equipment. He also confirmed their mission had been a success and that K23 was fit for humans to live on. On Earth, Augustine was doing his transfusion when Iris came to lie beside him. He pointed out the North Star and told her all about it. A flashback showed a younger Augustine working when Jean, his partner, visited him. She asked why he hadn't answered her calls, but Augustine didn't even look at her. Jean told him she wasn't pregnant after all, but Augustine didn't react. Crying, Jean said she understood his passion for exploring new worlds to give humanity hope. But in doing so, he was neglecting his own life. In the present, Augustine realized the radiation was spreading faster than expected. He found out about a weather station further north with a stronger antenna that could reach the Ether. Even though the journey would be very difficult, it was his only way to warn the crew and find help for Iris. Augustine packed his transfusion machine and supplies, dressed himself and Iris in protective gear, and the two began their journey. On the Ether, Maya used holograms to relive a memory. Sanchez watched her curiously, and Maya shared stories about her friends in the memory. Meanwhile, Mitchell watched a romantic movie and missed his wife. Sully and Aide played cards until an alarm went off across the ship. The crew discovered the ship had gone off course. To get back to Earth, they needed to travel through an unexplored area of space. Aide said they had no choice since they still couldn't contact Earth. On Earth, Augustine and Iris came across a crashed plane. Inside, they found a survivor who begged for help, but Augustine knew he couldn't save the man. Heartbroken, Augustine ended the man's suffering by shooting him. Augustine and Iris continued their journey, stopping to camp so Augustine could do his transfusions. In another flashback, Augustine ran into Jean, who now had a daughter. He asked if she had told the girl that he was her father. Jean said if Augustine wanted her to know, he could tell her himself. Augustine said nothing, and Jean walked away. Back on the ether, it was revealed that Sully was pregnant with a baby girl, and she and Aide were happily in a relationship. On Earth, Augustine and Iris drove through a storm. Iris pointed out shapes in the distance, which turned out to be camps. Augustine decided they should stop and rest there for the night. That evening, he told Iris he wished she would talk to him and share something about herself. Iris was busy drawing a woman's face. Augustine said he had once known a woman like that, who was loud and had a beautiful laugh. Suddenly, Iris looked up and asked if he loved her. Augustine realized it was a dream and woke up to see the camp sinking into icy water. He quickly took Iris to safety, but returned to get his transfusion machine. He managed to grab it, but the ice broke under the snowmobile, and both Augustine and the machine fell into the freezing water. The machine sank too deep for him to reach. Augustine swam to the surface and, despite the cold, survived. He realized his time was now limited. Augustine and Iris continued their journey on foot, facing harsh weather and wild animals. During a storm, they were surrounded by wolves. Augustine fired his gun to scare them off, but lost track of Iris in the chaos. The storm was too strong, and Augustine collapsed. When it cleared, Iris found him, and he hugged her tightly. They kept moving and finally reached the weather station. At the station, Augustine used the stronger antenna to contact the ether. He spoke with Sully, who was glad to hear from him. She asked why no one on Earth had contacted them. Augustine began explaining the global disaster, but before he could finish, the ether entered an unmapped asteroid field, damaging its radar and communication systems. After escaping the asteroid field, Mitchell saw that the damage needed repairs outside the ship. Sully and Maya planned to handle it, but since Maya had no spacewalking experience and Sully was pregnant, Aide joined to supervise. The three went outside and began the repairs while Sanchez played music to lift their spirits. Just as they finished, another asteroid field hit the ship. They barely held on and survived, but Maya noticed blood floating in her suit. Aide realized she had a serious wound and was losing oxygen quickly. He rushed her inside while Sanchez brought a medkit. The airlock took too long to depressurize, and by the time they removed her helmet, she had lost too much blood. Despite Sanchez's efforts, Maya didn't survive. Later, the ship received a message sent 10 days earlier from Earth. It was from Mitchell's wife, saying their sons were sick, and everyone was being evacuated. She looked distressed, and Mitchell became emotional as he watched the message. Afterward, he told Aide that Sully and Aide should take the ship back to K-23 to start over. Mitchell planned to use a landing pod to return to Earth and search for his wife. Sanchez offered to go with him, wanting to take Maya's body back to Earth for burial. Sanchez shared that he had lost a young daughter who was about Maya's age, and he had seen Maya as his own child. As Sanchez and Mitchell prepared to head to Earth, Sully contacted Augustine to thank him. She told him he was the reason she became a scientist, and thanked him for discovering K-23. Sully revealed that he had worked with her mother, Jean Sullivan, and had given her a moon rock when she was a child. Then it became clear Sully was Augustine's daughter. She called him Dr. Lofthouse, but he asked her to call him Augustine. She told him her name was Iris, and he said he already knew. This revealed that the little girl who had been with Augustine all along was a hallucination of his daughter, and he had known it. Augustine asked Sully to describe K-23. As she spoke, he imagined himself standing on the planet with the younger version of Iris. Finally, the radio connection was lost, and Sully and Aide realized they were now alone. They began their journey back to K-23 to try to rebuild humanity. No mention was made of how difficult or unlikely this plan was.